Hi, Volker.
Hi.
How good was God's favorite dog?
In terms of speed? No, I'm kidding. How good
Yeah, for
was...
you? How do you look back on it?
I think it was a great band. It was actually a band that was based on the meeting of me and my cousin. And my cousin was disappearing for, well, I met him as a kid and then he disappeared to America. And he studied in Richmond, Virginia. And by accident we met in Düsseldorf in the street, in front of a bar. And which was really a coincidence. I didn't know that he was in Germany, but I saw him and I said to him, I think you're my cousin. You know? And he said, yeah, well, what is your name? You know, and then we found out that we were meeting as kids and stuff like that. And I think immediately we thought about a band. And,
Why?
Because we both were, I don't know, we spoke about music. He was extremely influenced by, at that time, there was like a lot of crossover, Nirvana, all the Seattle sounds, Generation X, this whole time. And so we were big fans of stage diving and jumping, and hip hop was also for us important. So in a way, God's Favorite Dog was an expression of us meeting, and we tried to find, in a way, we were working at that time already the same as I'm working with Hauschka today, like finding a good theme for releasing records or for having a new album out.
Yeah. And well, what was the album? What was the theme for this album? The album is called Abandoned City.
Yeah.
Well, how did it start? This theme.
The theme.
Yeah.
Well, actually, first of all, the music was completely finished. I recorded. I started with the first track that is called Elizabeth Bay. That was a piece that was in the first place a sketch for music for Wagner adaptation of The Flying Dutchman. There was an idea of keeping this piece for the overture, but by working, and then I sent that to the director, and he said, no, I want to have more like realistic instruments, and I kept this piece on my hard drive, and that was last year in spring. I kept it on my hard drive, and I felt always very attracted by the sound of it.
Why?
Because somehow I was fascinated by the idea of using the preparations in the same way as with the older records beforehand, but in a way the piano disappeared in this cloud of, like, maybe of a forgotten space. It was more like a piano that is played under a carpet or a blanket, and you can hear the melody, but it's not really obvious. And on the other side there was a lot of darkness in there, and distortion, and reverb, and in a way that was sticking with me, because I felt also as a pianist, when you do more records, it can be quite, after a while, the sound of the piano itself has a lot of cliches built in. So in a way I was a little bit skeptical if I want to do a next record that is very like pure piano.
Yeah.
And in a way then I started to complete the whole record in terms of, I think I did 16 or 17 tracks. I think more, I recorded more, but then I choose 17 tracks. And then I was trying to find a kind of theme for the...
How come you try to find it? Why not have a theme and then write from that theme?
To be quite honest, I think it's not always nice to to do a one-to-one transportation. So I'm not a big fan of sitting in Düsseldorf at the Rhine and writing a song about the Rhine, because it always seems to me like a very complicated. I bring myself in a very complicated situation. I mean, I can do that, but I rather do something that is like instinctively pouring out of me. And then I'm trying to find pictures or a story that is connected with that.
But does that okay?
Yeah.
So you start well, you're trying to find a theme. What made you? What did you find?
Well, first of all, I found a picture. The picture that is on the cover is done by a friend of mine, and it's like he's not a photographer. He's a person that travels a lot to the US, and he made this picture outside of Las Vegas, which is a empty parking lot, like a construction that should have been a parking space, but nobody was taking care of that anymore. And so he made this picture because it's standing in the kind of desert. And I saw this picture on his wall, and while I was doing this, while I was working on the music, and I felt somehow fascinated by the loneliness and the absurdness of it. It was like something, and at the same time I was fascinated by the structure and the clear shape. And in a way I felt that this was quite coping with my music. I had the impression that I felt, while I was doing the music, I felt as well lonely in a way sometimes, but not in a bad way. I don't know, when you're working on on films and you're cutting things, maybe you get into this zone where you just lose time, and then you wake up and you're like, oh shit, I'm sitting alone in a room, and if I would fall from my chair with a heart attack, nobody would actually find me, in a way like that. But on the other side, it's very nice to be in a to forget yourself as well, you know. And I was looking for things that are representing that. And when I was looking at this building, I felt like maybe I should look into abandoned buildings. And so I went to the internet. I put in abandoned buildings, abandoned cities, and abandoned places. And then I found this list on Wikipedia that was saying that there are 2,500 abandoned cities in the world, which I was totally fascinated by, because I was thinking, oh man, that's a lot, you know. And then I went through a couple of them and was reading the stories, and I was amazed by the diversity, why cities were abandoned, you know.
Tell me.
Well, you have cities that are abandoned because of course, of catastrophes, like Pripyat is left because of the Tsjernobyl accident. Then you
Pripyat
have...
is a song on your album too.
Yes, it's the second song. Then you have places that are left because the war happened and the houses were bombed, or like Akdam, there was a kind of genocide happening in this city. So, you know, these are very tragic stories. But then you have also Thamstown, that is a city that is built in China in the style of an English city, and nobody wants to live there because they hate maybe English cities, and it's built for 20,000 people, and it's completely empty, and now it's visited by couples that are doing a wedding just to, you know, but they have a huge amount of space because you have streets, you have traffic lights, everything is working.
But how come, well, you said you wrote the songs, and then you picked certain cities that were abandoned, and you named those songs after those abandoned cities.
Yeah.